Good afternoon from the center of Jerusalem. This is Dan Diker. I'm here with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Fiamma Nirenstein, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, War Room Diplomacy Briefing, just back from the Knesset on the Knesset caucus to reform and reconstruct UNRWA, the United States Relief Works Agency, which has become a hornet's nest for many, many decades of anti-Semitism, of support for terror. This is day 95 of the counter-jihad, counter-terrorism war in Gaza, and of course, things heating up over the northern border with Lebanon. Very sadly, as many of our friends and viewers and family know across the ocean on this program, there have been some 10 or even 11 fighters, Israeli soldiers, that have been killed in the last 24-hour period, if I'm not mistaken. There were just 5 that were added to this tragic toll, having exposed and really diffused a Hamas, Iranian-backed Hamas rocket factory in southern Gaza, which is really the bowels of the Hamas command center, the underground terror metro tunnel network. And it was, I will say this, as we continue deep into late stage 2, what Israel's calling the beginning of stage 3, even though we at the JCPA think it's a little bit premature to call it stage 3 in Gaza, because there's an awful lot of major counterterrorism work to be done before reducing troop levels significantly and just relying on special forces to attack and decapitate the Hamas leadership in Gaza. One of the major issues that we haven't yet discussed, which today, right now, with Fiamma Nirenstein, one of the great global authorities on genocidal anti-Semitism, the author of many, many, many books on the topic, and the former deputy president of the Italian Foreign Affairs Commission in the Chamber of Deputies, is here. We're going to be talking about the metastasizing genocidal anti-Semitism across the West, stemming from the October 7th Iran-backed Hamas mass murder here in Israel. And Fiamma, it's almost strange to be talking about this massive intensification of global genocidal anti-Semitism. You would think the opposite. You would have thought that after October 7th, where the Hamas invaded Israeli sovereign territory in the worst act of mass murder since the Nazi period, that certainly in the West, that there would be some sort of understanding and sympathy, but as you've seen, it's the opposite.
Not only this, I think then, and it's very important that we start to discuss this subject, because it's part of the war that we are in this period. The anti-Semitism is part of this war of survival for Israel and for the Jewish people to fight this war. The intentions of the Hamas terrorists that assaulted the people living in the north of Israel were clearly genocidal. They were racist and genocidal. I mean that they were looking for anybody that had the characteristic of being a Jew. And so they massacred in the most terrible way that can ever be imagined, children and women and young men and old men, and kidnapped them in a way that has been defined the most terrible that has been practiced since the time of the Holocaust. And actually, what you see today that immediately connects the issue with the issue of anti-Semitism is the fact that our survivors of the Holocaust that live here in Israel nowadays, and also all over the world, say that the fear and the feelings that they felt during the terrible day that were the ones that the army of Hitler chased them are just the same kind of feeling that they feel today, being hunted by a an ideology and a way of seeing the Jews that is a genocidal way that since the very first day after the genocidal attack in the north of Israel has been
In the south, in the south.
excuse me, in the south has been the one perceived and then pursued by the people that refused to condemn what was happened and on the opposite decided that it was the right time for them to show, and this is one of the very new things that are happening today, to show widely from the squares to the universities, from the persecution of single Jews in the diaspora, to the demonstration against Israel all over the world, to show openly, plainly, without shame, their anti-Semitism, their wish and their determination in the most clear and evident form of anti-Semitism that was always there, but never dared to show itself so widely as in these times.
So, but explain one thing to Fiamma. Explain why is it that the Hamas massacre opened up the possibility of this public international demonstration of collective and individual Jew hatred? Why was it absolutely? It was the massacre itself, in a way, with its own knife, that opened up the international discourse on anti-Semitism.
Allora, the reason why, but I would like then to go back to the extreme consequence of that then, which is because it starts right away. On Thursday, there will be the opening, the official opening in Den Haag of a ironic, incredible, strange trial against Israel.
Brought by the Republic of South Africa, the ANC, African National Congress
Exactly.
government, on charges of genocide.
On
I mean,
charges
as a
of
matter of fact,
genocide. And this is really
that's the classic anti-Semitic
no,
trope.
it's not only the classic anti-Semitic trope, is the internationalized open expression of how strong it is today. It's a sort of summarizing, putting out all the things that I was describing now, squares and university, and then international institutions, which has actually been
That's the international institutions which have actually promoted. You've said this for a long time since writing the connection between the human rights organizations, the UN, anti-Semitism. They become international platforms for the promotion of anti-Semitism.
See, exactly. Now you were asking why, this is not new. I mean, every time there has been a persecution of the Jews, and we have seen very many. Maybe the worst before that has been the second Intifada, where more than 1,000 Jews were killed, and every day buses were exploding, restaurants were attacked everywhere, and still there was not this straight and clear condemnation, but there was always the research by the international institution, first and foremost the United Nations, and also the European Union, and then all the groups that are like Amnesty International and devoted, so to say, to human rights. They were always searching for what? For the political reasons why those things were happening. And actually, I think that it has been very meaningful that immediately after the slaughter here in Israel, Gutierrez, the president, the secretary of the United Nations, immediately pronounces the famous sentence that said this doesn't happen in a void, which was really an expression of pure anti-Semitism.
Let's explain what you're saying here. What Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, is saying, or attempted to say, is that the Hamas massacre didn't happen in a void, meaning there's a but. There is that very troubling but, meaning, oh, it's a terrible thing of that Hamas mass murdered children, but there is a political context. That's what Guterres was saying.
This is exactly
which is
that's exactly all the politics of the anti-Semitic organization nowadays.
So here
there is always a but.
So the but also extends to the UNRWA, to the United States Relief Work Agency,
Yes,
the refugee organization,
for sure.
unique to the Palestinians in Gaza, and as well as in other areas. It's in Gaza, it's in Judea and Samaria, it's in Syria, it's in Lebanon, it's in Jordan.
Santi, if you think that Amnesty International, the year that passed, okay, signed and organized 280 resolution against the state of Israel, while there was 61 about Venezuela and 40 about Iran. This explains to you everything. I mean, there has always been a very precise objective in trying to put the anti-Semitism on the track of the justification of the Israeli politics. Now, how can it be defined? All of this starts in the time of the Soviet Union. I mean, after, of course, the Second World War and the anti-Semitism of Nazis that brought to the killing of 6 million Jews. But afterwards, the new trend of anti-Semitism starts with the Soviet Union, that starts defining Israel as a racist, imperialist, capitalist, racist organization, and channels all of his allies inside the international organization, first and foremost the United Nations, that arrived in 1975 until the point of voting the famous, infamous resolution, Israel Zionism is racism, puts on the political track the very basic assumption that you must define in the most disgusting way your enemy, so that he will be hated and despised and put on the border of civilization. And all of this heritage has been afterwards received as a gift and practiced by all the organizations that define themselves defenders of human rights. Actually, it's always, and it will be just the same now when on next Thursday. And here there is really a big struggle that we have to fight against anti-Semitism. There will be the beginning of the sessions of the ICJ against Israel on initiative of the South African government. Don't forget what Lenin explained in 1907. The wording is calculated to provoke the reader hatred, disgust, contempt. The phrasing must be calculated not to convince, but to destroy, not to correct the adversary mistake, but to annihilate his organization and wipe it off the face of the earth. This is exactly what is the attempt when you say that Israel is a genocidal country that wants to destroy the Palestinian people on an ethnic and racist basis.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that the Republic of South Africa, who's governed, by the way, has hosted the Hamas, celebrates the Hamas, and encourages the Hamas, is the country that's actually filing this libelous, slanderous, ridiculous, I mean, just simply morally intolerable case against Israel. But you see in what you've described is the political inversion of morality here. Is that anything, as a member of Knesset, Simon Davidson said this afternoon from the Yesh Atid party, he said he came out of the Holocaust, his whole family was extinguished in the Holocaust. He comes to Israel and he's now witnessing another Holocaust, and the Holocaust inversion, as you've written about in your books, Jewish Lives Matter, and you talked about it in the double message, the other book on human rights.
See, you're mentioning our books of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Before that, already in the 90s, I started writing book about this terrible discovery that the anti-Semitism that we know was no more the right-wing anti-Semitism, that was the one that the left liked to define as its own enemy, but was a part of the new left, the left that defined itself a defender of human rights. So while discovering this, I tried to convince the people that didn't even know that this was what was happening to them, that they had to step down from. But in the meantime, what happened is that this kind of movements, the leftist human rights, quote unquote, movement has been meeting the internationally stronger and stronger movement of the Muslim immigrants that all over in Europe and the United States have been a partisan of the Palestinian cause, so to call it, that has become the Hamas cause, which is the cause of destroying the state of Israel, because this is the real truth. Now we have an anti-Semitism that wants to destroy the Jewish people in its most important expression, and of course is an enemy to the culture, to the laws, to the improvements that have been achieved by the democratic society all over the world, and is attacked by this neo-communist, I would define it, and neo-Islamist party together. So I think that we, as the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, have a lot of work to do about it, because the streams that this anti-Semitism takes today are so many. You can find it in many different expressions, in the Islamic world, in the Palestinian world, in the Shiite and in the Sunni face. You can find it in the institutions. You can find it among the people. You can find among the students. You find this among the most important the leadership of the American university. You find it among the students that frighten the Jewish student in the university. So I thought, together with the president and Diker, that it's about time that we make a front struggle, and we started that, please, then, from an initiative that will be one of our many projects about anti-Semitism. And in any case, I already announced that every single Tuesday, if there are no
barring anything like wars and terrorism, we will make we're going to have a weekly discourse briefing with the two of us and another guest on this metastasizing problem of genocidal global anti-Semitism, because it is a strategic, if not an existential threat, both to the collective Jewish community in Israel as well as the Jewish community abroad. The fact that Grand Central Station in New York City has been overtaken twice by people who are calling for Jews, Nazis, and the death to Israel, and what they call pro-Palestinian demonstrators. It has nothing to do, as our own Khaled Abu Talmik describes it, as being pro-Palestinian. It really is simply death to Israel dressed up in this language that basically appears virtuous but really is villainous. And these are the very important code language that I was just talking to a member of Knesset, Zev Elkin, who's in charge. He's the chairman of the subcommittee in the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee on international public diplomacy. And we were talking with him just a few minutes ago before we braved the traffic back here to the Jerusalem Center to talk about the importance of soft power in the whole national security concept of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. And I think that's very much what Fiamma is talking about now. It's not just more and more discourse about anti-Semitism. But Jew hatred, as it has evolved out of the October 7 mass murder, is a very important expression of deep concern about a metastasizing international problem for the Jewish community, both from Israel and extending out to where many of our
we can see
viewers are right now.
And we can see that there can be some victories if we really fight.
So let's talk about Rome. Under Fiamma's instruction and relationship, we recently had, as some of you who go to jcpa.org can read about the summary of what was, thank God, a very successful discourse we had. It was a hybrid discourse. I was dispatched to Rome to be with former Foreign Minister Giulio Terzi, a dear friend of Fiamma's and a colleague for many years.
The president of the Commission for Human Rights in the Italian
Senate. And he hosted us, Giulio hosted us in Rome for a special, I think it was probably an unprecedented, certainly in the last years, assembly on discussing this phenomenon of global and metastasizing anti-Semitism. And Fiamma was here with our team on the Zoom, and we presented what is here, which is the 10 principles, for fighting anti-Semitism, which stem from the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition on anti-Semitism, which includes calling Israel nation state of the Jewish people.
Please read them on our website and sign them, because we are looking for signatures on what are for us the 10 laws that we can use for combating anti-Semitism. It's not a definition of anti-Semitism. This is a definition. It's an application. It's a way of fighting and defeating anti-Semitism, which is always something that we look forward to doing here from our center in these coming months, because, as I said at the beginning of our meeting, we really consider this struggle like a part of the war that we are fighting now in Israel. I am sure that our soldiers that are on the field would be very happy now if they could be part of this and say how disappointed and incredibly sorry they are that the people don't understand the bravery and the absolute need to fight the fight of the Jewish people today, and on the opposite, they condemn it under a very false and anti-Semitic point of view on our intentions and on our way of fighting the war. We will discuss that.
It's important. I want to bring our conversation to a very concrete and specific context. In the Knesset this afternoon, at Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, we were invited to present our position on what is being called the day after. And the day after is not the day after the war. It's really now. The day after is now. Just the way we say never again is now. It's a term that you've used, a term that Michal Kotler-Wunsch, she's also a JCPA fellow, has been using in her professional work. And what we discussed in the Knesset just an hour ago, Fiamma, was the idea that the latest institutional expression of very problematic anti-Semitism and support for terrorism is the UNRWA organization. Secretary of State Blinken is here right now as we hold this conversation, insisting on upgraded humanitarian help through UNRWA. And in fact, what came out in this discussion is that UNRWA is very much the problem, not the solution. Having said that, we invoked and mentioned the comments that our very own attorney Alan Baker had made as the former legal advisor to Israel's foreign ministry, as well as a senior legal advisor to the United Nations with regard to UNRWA. And we talked about creating a supervisory body over UNRWA that would be comprised of Israel and donor nations, led by the United States and the United States and the European Union, in order to monitor and protect from a security standpoint, from a managerial standpoint, a supervisory standpoint, a fiduciary responsibility standpoint. Every dollar or every euro that goes into UNRWA has to be accounted for. And Israel in the past has played sort of a hands-off. We played a hands-off, too much of a hands-off role.
Okay, so bringing this issue to the subject of anti-Semitism, I would say that UNRWA has been the nest of the most terrible use done by the United Nations, particularly of the concept itself of refugees. Refugees is not an eternal concept, has never been, has not been for Pakistan and India, has not been for Europe, has not been a concept that contains in itself the issue of war. While UNRWA has made the concept of refugees a concept of war against Israel and the Jews. It's a matter of fact that nowadays, when our soldiers fight and find themselves in front of the UNRWA structure, always, there has not been a different example. They always find inside the structures of UNRWA either weapons ready for the fight, or books that are the basis for the culture of incitement that creates the new classes of terrorists that are the very reason of the fight that we are obliged to fight today. I want to go back for a second also to the concept of never again that you put down here very wisely. Now, never again, it's the most important concept that must be that we must renew completely, because the never again that we have seen until today hasn't worked and we don't like it. Okay, never again, like a sort of crying on the dead Jews that died in the Holocaust. It's a duty. We will always remember there. In my families, there are many. I suppose that in many of the people that is watching us, I am partly Italian, partly Polish, and in both of the sides, we had people that died in Auschwitz.
As I'm sure as many of our participants and viewers are in
this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But now I want to say that when I'm a journalist, when I now was on the field interviewing our soldiers, a young man told me, my grandfather was in Auschwitz and survived. My father fought the war on 1973 and fought and survived. Myself, now I'm here. It's my turn, and it is never again. Never again is me, these soldiers told me. It's my turn. Now this is never again. Never again is Israel that fights today on the battlefield. This is never again. Never again is the fact that Israel exists and that Am Israel High. That's the reason why we will never have it again. They cannot dream of destroying us again. Israel is here and is fighting. So we must bring the subject of never again straight to the survival of Israel. This is what I meant.
The problem we face, Fiamma, and we say this from Jerusalem, is that Israel has to do a much better job in its official capacity as the anchor of the international Jewish community, as the homeland for the international Jewish community, in speaking about this issue the way that you've spoken about it, with so many years of experience in the diaspora from Europe, holding the European Commission to account, holding European countries to account, and that comes because of your experience, not as an Israeli per se, but as a Jew of Italian, Polish descent. And what I'm trying to emphasize here is that in the past years there has been too much of I think of Israeli apathy in the public domain because of Israel's physical ability to defend the nation state of the Jewish people, and by extension the Jewish community. There has been too little attention paid to the deleterious and even fatal effects of anti-Semitic rhetoric in the international community. People want to know, why is it at Harvard University, my alma mater, and at universities across Europe and the United States, that there is this genocidal rhetoric tearing across the United States? Well, the reason is is that Israeli governments, Israeli offices, the Knesset, as well as international Jewish institutions, have failed as a collective Jewish community to stand up against this notion of Zionism as racism, the notion that the Durban I conference in 2001, 8 days before 9/11, they summarized Israel as, branded Israel as a genocidal, Nazi, apartheid, war criminal entity. And there was not enough done to stand up against that type of Jew hatred, frankly. And the fact that we did not stand up to it and call it out internationally, and basically, as they say in Hebrew, Baal Habayit ishtagea, that the owner of the house has gone crazy over these types of false, libelous, and slanderous accusations. That has come back to haunt us now, with the Hamas leading the way, by the way, and the West in its incredibly supporting the Hamas under the umbrella of pro-Palestinianism. This entire machinery of lies, of anti-Semitism, has to now be fought from every corner of the globe where Jews are in a leadership position.
Yes, I think that what you're saying is perfectly fit with the idea that we are expressing since the day after the disaster of the 7th of October, that nothing will be as it was. And this is something that I think must be elaborated day after day, because it's difficult, changing. It's a mosaic of a new kind of conception and expressions and political moves. I think that we go into this direction. There couldn't be nothing newer than seeing Prime Minister Netanyahu together with Judge Aaron Barak presenting themselves together as a unit in front of the International Tribunal to defend the fact that Israel is fighting a just war of justice and of survival, and certainly it doesn't have anything to do with the accusation of genocide. The two of them have been bitter enemies in the course of the discussion about the reform of justice. Nowadays, and there is discussion and criticism about that, but I think that this is a brilliant expression of how new Israel is, exactly what you were saying before, how new Israel is today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's extraordinary, Fiamma, is that you have an accusation against Israel as genocide. Now, in Gaza, right? So Gaza has, according to UN activists, 2,200,000. We believe there's a little bit less, or there'll be fewer people, something like 2 million. But let's take 2 million as a round number. If, according to the Hamas Ministry of Health, which many people in the international news organizations fail to note, this is a Hamas number. It's the same Hamas that were beheading babies, that are now supplying human rights, that are supplying victim numbers to the international community, which, by the way, the major networks in the United States are using uncritically. They call them the Gaza Ministry of Health. This is the same Hamas that are beheading and burning children, that are supplying the numbers to the international community. Let's go according to their numbers, Fiamma. 20,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. We know for sure that between 10 and 12,000 of them are Hamas operatives themselves. So let's say 8,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed. Every civilian killed is a tragedy, unquestionably, but the Hamas are to be held directly responsible, because we know that the Hamas commits double war crimes by hiding behind inside UNRWA educational compounds and humanitarian compounds and residential buildings and in mosques and in schools, and hides their weapons, fires their weapons, hides ammunition from within residential and UNRWA areas. So let's say that 8,000. So if you have a million people, 1% is 10,000, 1/10 of 1% is 1,000. So 1/10 of 1% of the population of Gaza has been fatally affected by this war. That doesn't quite sound like genocide to me, does it? In even just in numbers, never mind the intent as opposed to the effect. So when people do the simple math, they're able to completely, we say in Hebrew, lafrich, which is really to disabuse people of this ridiculous, slanderous type of behavior. But many people in our community are either for some reason unwilling or afraid or just not prepared to do it. And I think that Israel bears a large responsibility, not only for defending what we do, but for unmasking.
Don't forget, at the beginning of the war, there was another among the many good reasons why we have to look at the number in a different way. Remember when there was a missile that hit a Gazan hospital? It was a Palestinian missile.
Yeah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
So, and now there is a high percentage of these missiles that hit the territory itself of the Gaza Strip. So, you know, also this must be taken into consideration. And remember that when this news that an hospital has been stricken by a missile came out, we were ready to take responsibility, to jump down from the responsibility as soon as we realized that it was not us.
Well,
okay?
we were too quick to accept responsibility,
exactly.
which is
So,
exactly what happened in Mohammed al-Dura in 2001.
Exactly, and it is exactly what you have described as our complete attitude all along the time that brought us to accept all kind of compromises, either ideological, sense of guilt, fear of being described as oppressors. I mean, all of these things now after you know what has happened, terrible as it has been, and we are all still inside it, hands and feet and head. Still, it's something that has revealed where we really are, and in this there is something that we can think that we can use for creating a better future for the Jewish
Absolutely.
people.
I want to just take a couple of comments and questions from our friends abroad. Ram Roth makes an interesting point here, calling himself, as we know, he's the son of a survivor, and he says, I never thought that never again was intended to be never again in the world, meaning that he understood never again was intended to be never again in the world to us and to others, but in fact, never again failed. In other words, it happened again. In other words, what they're saying. That's right.
That we don't accept anymore that never again.
Right.
We are creating now a never again that is completely different and starts from this child at war that says never again is me. This is what he says. And I think that he's totally right.
Yeah, so Maurice Hirsch offering a word of caution, talking about the numbers to disprove genocide. There doesn't necessarily have to be millions of dead. That's true, because it has to be, well, it has to do with intention and outcome in order to talk about genocide. Sure. And clearly Israel is only targeting Hamas, and in fact has lost many soldiers. There's 180 soldiers that have been killed.
It's simply ridiculous that somebody could think that our intention going to war with Gaza was a genocidal intention. We have been suffering a genocide by Hamas. Yeah. And that's the reason why by a war of defense and of necessity have been obliged to go into Gaza. That's a reason why. And any person that has not only a sense of reality, but also that knows a little bit of history and knows that we are out of Gaza since 2005, will not dare saying that we have something against the Palestinian people and against the Gazan people. We don't, but we have to survive.
Well, clearly, and in fact, Elise Corson, a very regular participant in these wonderful briefing discussions, and writes it was clear in the days immediately following 10/7 that it was a preconceived trap to set Israel up for genocide charges. That's actually true. That very much, you're very right, at least that's very, very true, that this was an a priori strategic mandate of Hamas, which Israel, I'm sorry to say, but Israel failed to either to understand or to act in line with that many decades long, since 1987 and the founding of Hamas, was their strategic deception strategy, is always to cast Israel as as a mass murderer, and while Israel is too busy defending itself as opposed to unmasking that strategy every day to the international community, so we don't get caught flat-footed on our heels defending ourselves the way it happened. Look what happened back in 2001. We talked about the Mohammed al-Dura Pallywood case, And it continues today with the hospital case back in October, just a week or two after the war, when it was clear that the PIJs misfired is what ended up killing people in the hospital parking lot. And you know, this type of strategy just continues. I wanted to mention, Lisa's actually very prolific today, talking about the national security. Admiral Kirby debunked the ICC charge by South Africa as meritless. Thank you for that. That's important, counterproductive, and devoid of fact. I mean, this is obviously something that we've got to be attacking every single day and stop defending ourselves. But as we said in the Knesset, going on offense is very, very important. It was mentioned by Lisa that you know, the Egyptians had refused to open the Rafah crossing, and you know, that also has its own implications, ramifications for people that say that Israel is managing the biggest open-air prison. Well, there are no other open-air prisons in the world with huge skyscrapers and swimming pools and beachfront luxury properties, as was the case in Gaza until the Hamas decided to kill.
If Italy or England was in a situation as the one that Egypt is today, with thousands of refugees that try to enter the borders and would not open the border, they would be accused by all the international echelon.
Absolutely.
This doesn't happen because Israel is the first one that must be accused, and also Israel is accused, and nobody looks at the Egyptian as a real state, while Al-Sisi makes his own politics without taking into consideration at all the international public opinion, and we do.
Well, we do. I think not only do we take into account, but I think we very much are hypersensitive to international public opinion. And there comes a time when there's a collision between international public opinion. Certainly in the West, when we talk about international public opinion, we're really talking about the West, because there is no real serious public opinion in the non-democratic world. But here, there's a major challenge here in the need for Israel to protect itself, as well as its body politic, and by extension, working with Jewish organizations to protect Jews around the world, because everybody is on the firing line now. Fiamma, we're going to continue our discussion as we move next into the next briefing about genocidal anti-Semitism and what we can do next week at the same time with Dr. Fiamma Nirenstein, and bring up new issues. We hope for good news from Jerusalem for all of us. We thank you ever so much for being such a wonderful, loyal group of co-questioners, loyalists to the cause of Israel and the cause of freedom in the West. Frankly, it's not only about Israel, but it's about freedom and liberty in the whole Western world. That's what's at stake now, opposite the Iranian regime's access of terror. As we continue, we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 9 o'clock New York time, and 2 o'clock London time, 2 p.m. London time, 9 a.m. New York time, across the waters. And shalom to everybody from Jerusalem. Thanks for being with us today, and we're always happy to take your questions and comments on our email, and we will address them appropriately.